Hate crimes in America have substantially increased over the last decade. According to data released by the FBI, the Justice Department, more than 7,700 criminal hate crime incidents were reported to the FBI in 2020. Overall, hate crimes incidents based solely on race had the highest increase reported between 2019 and 2020. More than 4,900 incidents were reported last year compared to more than 3,900 in 2019. The data also showed that anti-black assaults increased to 2,755 in 2020 from 1,930 in 2019. 56% of hate crimes committed strictly on the basis of race were against black people, the highest rate among any racial group. The racial solidarity displayed during what was considered America's racial reckoning has waned, and we may now be experiencing a backlash to it. Joining us now is the Chief of Staff at the Southern Poverty Law Center, Lecia Brooks. Ms. Brooks, thank you for joining us. Can you explain to us what is fueling this rise in hate crimes as reported to the FBI?
Well, thank you so much for having me, Charles. The increase in hate crimes, as you mentioned, is alarming. It's about a 6% increase over 2019 numbers, and really the highest numbers reported since 2008. And you're right to point out that anti-black hate crimes, or black people being targeted by hate crimes and hate violence, is number one again. Every year since 1991, race-based hate crimes have been the most numerous. And every year since 1991, black folks have been the target of hate crimes by large majorities. So again, I mean, it's high, but it's no different than any other year. I think it's also important to note that though the numbers seem really large, it's important to remember that the statistics that come from the FBI's hate crime statistics report are notoriously underreported. This report says about 21 hate crimes happen or occur in the United States every day. Other crime statistics point to a much higher number. We estimate that about 200,000 hate crimes exist annually within the United States. So if we look at 2020, which this report was for, we can certainly look back and remember the rhetoric that came out of the White House that served to further divide the country around kind of all kinds of things, including an increase in anti-black sentiment.
Can you help to put this into some sort of context, relating it to the summer that George Floyd was killed and all of the activities around, racial reckoning, and what we have seen after that? Some black officials have risen to power. You've seen, books about race rise to the bestsellers list. You've seen in the arts a lot of film and Broadway even incorporating more black voices. So there seems to be some activity towards inclusion on that side, but there's a whole backlash portion of America that also seems to be playing out simultaneously. Can you just talk us through that?
Sure, that is our history, right? I mean, we can look back. I'm in Montgomery, Alabama. I need look no further than the civil rights movement and look at the advancements that were made then. Also recognize that that was a multiracial, intergenerational kind of effort to secure civil and human rights for black folks, and we see a backlash throughout that timeline of the civil rights movement, and certainly afterwards. You mentioned the increased support for black folks and a seeming understanding of what anti-black racism meant, and that was completely genuine. I don't doubt it at all. But there will always be a backlash to the empowerment of black folks in the United States. So that is to be expected. So we saw it, after the election of Barack Obama as the first African American president of the United States, and so we continue to repeat those cycles.
Anti-Asian hate received a lot of attention, and I think rightly so. Was there also a rise in hate towards Asians and any other groups?
Yes, of course, there was about a 53% increase in anti-Asian and Pacific Islander directed hate crimes. Up 179 were reported in 2019 and 274 in 2020. Of course, we shouldn't be surprised about that. We can certainly have a direct line back to the former president on that as well. His rhetoric and anti-Asian sentiment, his his comments around the COVID-19 pandemic, blaming that on Chinese and referring to it as the Wu Tang one, not Wu Tang, the Hong Kong flu, and that those kinds of things, when it comes from the president of the United States, really does serve to embolden people to carry out acts of hate and violence. They feel like they have permission to do so.
I mean, should there, or will there, or is there some cross-racial way to fight back against all this kind of hate and hate crimes coming at people in this way, or are people kind of siloed in their reaction to this, and only fighting back when it is their group that is attacked?
Well, I appreciate you discussing the topic tonight, because I think it's really important for people to recognize that we have this incomplete data that gives us probably the most important and most comprehensive picture of hate violence in the United States, and it's important, even though it's underreported, that we pay attention to it. It can serve to create empathy and support for people who are being targeted. It also serves to validate targeted populations that we're not making this up. We are being targeted for hate violence. We saw that when the Asian and Pacific Islander community released a report around the number of hate crimes that were targeted towards that group. So it's really important to keep these things in mind, and I think that it can help. We would say that the Southern Poverty Law Center would say that there's no way to really legislate this, or create policies that will change hearts and minds. It really is up to us as individuals to stand up, for the humanity of one another. And until we as a society decide that, we are not going to attack people because of who they are, whether they be, LGBT or Jewish, or these groups, Black folks that are targeted repeatedly year after year, we see a definite pattern. So it can serve to build empathy and support for those communities. What we hope happens at the Southern Poverty Law Center, we would direct our attention to members of Congress and ask them to do more in terms of producing better data that can help educate communities. It can also help educate law enforcement officials so that they can better address hate violence in communities. So there's a lot we can do with this information.